Welcome to another edition of Getting There and Giving Back, the show that talks to high achievers about where they are, how they got there, and how they're giving back. Our guest today is the founder and president of the Heroic Hearts Project, a 501c3 nonprofit pioneering psychedelic therapies for military veterans. Jesse Gould, thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I love what you're doing. In a lot of cases, we have to talk about the person's business and then separately move over to how they're giving back. But your whole business is built on giving back. And it started from a very personal place for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The business was founded on essentially giving back and sharing, and with no aspect of what we can do for ourselves. And we've been very fortunate. And even the mutual connection that we have is it just brought in so many more people that are also of the same mind of like, what can we do to help?
And what you're doing to help is using ayahuasca and psychedelics to help people get through PTSD, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I know when you hear the word psychedelics, a lot of people kind of have that initial reaction. They have their own sort of preconceptions based off their life, based off of what they heard. But we are here to sort of present it in a different light. And this is based on facts. This is based on research and just frankly based on results. We're dealing with a veteran population. I myself am a veteran, and I can go in that in a second. But unfortunately, the veteran community is going through a mental health crisis. We've been at war for over 20 years, and a lot of guys and girls are coming back with PTSD, depression, addiction, and there's just a massive suicide problem within the veteran community. And unfortunately, the current solutions are just not doing the job. And so veterans everywhere are looking for different alternatives. And fortunately for myself, just for my own livelihood and mental health, I stumbled upon this whole world that I had no idea really existed. And that is the psychedelic community and ayahuasca.
And before you help us understand that better, can you help us understand PTSD better? Because we hear about it all of the time. We are we're certainly all concerned about what our veterans are dealing with, but how does it manifest itself, and why is it so hard for traditional methods to deal with?
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, PTSD is kind of the poster of what veterans are going through, but what veterans are going through is a pretty expansive list of issues, mental health. PTSD has kind of become that blanket thing that people like, I don't really understand what it is, but I know veterans might have it. I know other people might have it. So it's the same sort of thing, even with a diagnosis. A lot of people are diagnosed with PTSD, and that might be one of the aspects, but there could be a whole variety of things. But at its very core, what we tend to understand and how it is diagnosed is that post-traumatic stress disorder comes from people being exposed to very traumatic events or situations that or heightened stress for a long period of time, and that it affects their brain in a very negative way to where they either have flashbacks, either have hypervigilance, can cause all sorts of series of other issues like depression, just because people are trying to cope with these very traumatic experiences in their life. And obviously, given veterans' job, they're often exposed to some very extreme dynamics in life through deployments, through combat, all that.
And did you stumble on to these therapies through your own experience with PTSD?
Yeah, so I'm myself, like many others, I had a few different issues, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. So I was an Army Ranger. I had 3 deployments to Afghanistan, and it was definitely lucky in terms of overall not having anything on the extreme end, but definitely when I got out of the military and tried to become a civilian and sort of adapt into that world, I just found myself hitting a lot of walls and just being very unhappy, unhealthy, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And there wasn't really a lot of literature similar to yourself, like, okay, if I have PTSD, what does that mean? How can I heal myself? And I just quickly came to the understanding that the ways we understand this and the offerings or the treatments that we have are very limited in their effectiveness. And for some people, they can be life-saving. And I'm not trying to knock what we have, but even through the VA's own statistics, it's roughly 2 out of 3 that still have tremendous issues after all the treatment. And that's what I found right now. A lot of these vets are coming to us, a small nonprofit, and they've tried everything the veteran has to offer, or the VA has to offer, and they might be on like 10 different medications, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the stereotypes about psychedelics and the ayahuasca, and they're hard to fight against because they're kind of based on some bit of truth, right? That either it's a recreational thing, it's something that your friends did when they went to Coachella to enhance their experience, or it's this esoteric spiritual thing. You had that other friend that went off to a rainforest and a shaman gave him ayahuasca. How are those both, I guess, separately true, but different from the great therapeutic use that you found?
Yeah, and I think there's also the third category. A lot of us grew up with sort of there's been a lot of money from the government and other entities to really push this, like, you're a criminal, you're dangerous if you do any sort of illicit substance. But there are, the recreational sides, there are different people that represent it better or maybe badly. There's a whole dynamic of it. But what we are finding is that with the psychedelic process, not only are you going into these states where you do see hallucinogenics and all this other kind of stuff, but within that, it can be very therapeutic because people are being exposed to traumas or issues in almost a completely different sense, a different way. And it separates them from the trauma to where they can process it, they can move on, they can almost re-engage the trauma with a different sort of authority or different sort of perspective. And we're also seeing on a physical level that some of these psychedelics, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's ayahuasca, which comes from plants in the Amazon, might actually heal the brain on a physical level. And so we're dealing with a multi-layered sort of potential therapeutic dynamic to a lot of these psychedelics, which previously were just sort of cast off of like, no, that's illegal. You're a legal drug. You're just doing this recreationally. But, even research through Johns Hopkins, NYU's starting some research, universities around the world are really starting to take a second look at the power of these substances, and the results so far have been pretty spectacular. And we're seeing the same thing anecdotally with all the veterans that we've served.
Yeah, I've read that the success rate has been really good for this particular use for these particular products. I hear people like Tim Ferriss and Sam Harris and a lot of people that have a big mainstream audience out there talking about how this therapy is going well. How did you transition from going, hey, this is something that helped me, into building Heroic Hearts project?
It was just such a big shift in terms of what I grew up believing through like the DARE program. And I had no experience in psychedelics before. I really came to this out of necessity, out of, knowing my life was going to go down a very bad path if I didn't change something drastically. And for whatever reason, my intuition pushed me to psychedelics. And so when I went through my first experience, it was almost instantly like, this is not what I thought it was. This is not what I had been told it was. And also through that process, I just instantly saw some pretty significant changes within myself, within my thought process, within certain things that used to really affect me and affect my mental health. And so from there, it was just like, if I'm this way, and even if this can help one more veteran, they deserve to at least be educated by this. We're not trying to push psychedelics. We're not trying to like hand out psychedelics at a store. But for people who are in the situation that were at the end of their path, like me, they deserve to know that there might be other options, and they deserve to have the education for them to responsibly make the decisions themselves. And so Heroic Hearts came out of that process, and then we also are able to facilitate it. So if somebody comes to this and they decide that, hey, this might be something for me, some sort of psychedelic treatment, we want to make sure that they're set up for success. It's almost a harm reduction, and also making sure that if they go into it, they have the support, they have the understanding, they have the preparation. And that just enhances everything that goes into this, to where they're not alone. They're not putting themselves in dangerous situations because they're foreigners to this world. And that's what we're trying to do with Heroic Hearts, of change the conversation, but then also figure out, okay, if these are effective, let's make a protocol around them. Let's build a community around it.
I want to get to that protocol in a second, but you said something interesting. You said, I thought it was one thing and it wasn't like that at all. What did you think it was going to be? And then what was it, that first experience or two?
I kind of just lumped it into like all drugs. Like, drugs are escapism, or drugs are, you're going to see crazy things and, the walls are going to move, but it was very on that superficial level. Like you're
Mm.
going through this experience and you're escaping, but nothing more profound than that, or nothing that is actually beneficial. It's just, almost like playing a video game or some sort of escapism. What I did find was just it goes much deeper than that. So yeah, there might be the hallucinogenic properties, but within that frame of mind, or within that, when you're within the psychedelic world, actually allows you to sort of reshape memories in a way that aren't as harmful to yourself. It allows you to view yourself and your life in different ways. And it also actually makes you face certain things that oftentimes our ego or these compartmentalizations that we put up really prevent us from seeing in ourselves. But when you're in the psychedelic trip, when you're in the sort of container that we set up, people are faced with like, hey, these are the negative patterns that you keep putting yourself through. This is why you ended up here. These are some of the things you need to change in your life. And it's almost unavoidable. And because it's coming from your own consciousness, your own brain, you are more likely to believe it, and it has a much bigger imprint.
It sounds almost like waking up after a really vivid dream and then having a dream expert immediately be able to say, oh, that talking dog was your mom. And that was that, but only it happens in real time, kind of like you don't, like as it's happening, unlike a dream, you're understanding the things you're working through.
It can be it's very similar in some dynamics, but much more poignant than a dream. So, oftentimes it can sort of present in a metaphor, in a sort of odd dream-like state that you understand, but it doesn't really make sense if you talk about it. But it does tend to be more poignant. And that, our brain does work in metaphors. And so that's how we understand it. But even like dreams, what often happens is, for instance, if I'm very anxious or I'm very sad, oftentimes I'll manifest in a dream of like, okay, I can't get this done. And you have these anxious dreams, and it might not be the exact situation that you're anxious about, but your dream is sort of releasing, or it's sort of reflecting that anxiety. And so it can kind of work in that same sort of way. But oftentimes too, it can be very like straightforward. Like you will see, we've had veterans see certain traumas, certain things they experience in combat, and be able to see it from almost a different lens, from the other person's lens, or zoomed out from themselves, and be able to sort of move on from the trauma so it doesn't just stay in this sort of repetitive negative sort of feedback loop.
Wow. Let's talk about that, the procedure, the protocol that you touched on earlier. Once someone's walked through this with you and they've decided, you know what, I think this is for me, I think it can help. What's that first experience like from your end? Like what happens?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So obviously, given the legality in this country, there's not a lot of infrastructure. And that's the saddest part about all this, is that prohibition and illegality actually makes a lot of these things different that people are going to partake in anyway. So we're trying to build the infrastructure when it's not there. So a veteran comes to us, and our first goal is really just safety. Like let's make sure that, health wise, what medications are on, because there's some that don't react well. So just doing that baseline, like, do we, from our experience, think that this is the next best step for them, or maybe something else that they should sort of approach before this? So if we kind of give the green light, and we figure out that like, okay, this might be a good thing for them, then we do the preparation, the coaching, which starts about a month or 2 months out. And this is really just kind of getting people in the mind frame, like doing mindfulness techniques, breathing exercises. Most people have not experienced, especially a major psychedelic. So there's a lot of information, answering questions, all that kind of stuff, and really building this container of support.
Okay.
And there's ways of, turning it inwards. Like, what am I looking for? Why am I having these issues? And so then prepare them. We provide financial grants, and then our support follows afterwards. So after they go through this and hopefully have a pretty profound experience, then the same integration, they call it, coaches, will follow up with the individual. How did it go? What did you think? Do you need help interpreting anything? And then we have group sessions. So we're rebuilding these veteran communities under this sort of umbrella of healing, to where the veterans will come back, participate in the group Zoom chat now, and just talk about it. Like, hey, I had this great experience. This last week was a little bit difficult. These issues were reintroduced in my life, but I was able to, not react the same way. And then other people were like, oh yeah, I had that same sort of issue. So it's a beginning to end, set them up for support around the psychedelic. And that's the biggest thing. This is not a magic pill. It's not like, boom, you take the psychedelic and you're healed. It takes a lot of work before and afterwards, but the psychedelic can really enhance somebody's ability to get from point A to point B in this sort of process.
Wow. So you get this passion from the great results you got. It continues to be fueled by seeing it work for other people. But how did you build it? How did you say, you know what, I want to build Heroic Hearts Project and make, where did it start? How did you get the funding? How have you gotten $350,000 in scholarships over the last little bit? Give us a little bit of the how.
It was really just a leap of faith at every walk of it. I was actually, because I went to my first experience in Peru, which is where ayahuasca stems from. And so after that, I had already left my job because I knew I was miserable there, and that was going to be the death of me in some ways. And so I was traveling still, and this is when the idea started coming about of like, there's a lot of veteran suffering. Let me start this and let's see where it goes. So, I literally started it in a small internet cafe in Colombia in South America with only a few $1,000s to my name. And just really, just from, some grit and really just pushing it forward, calling everybody that I thought could help, just started building it. And it really took a life of its own. And to this point, we're just, finding the right people at the right time and having people like yourself really help us spread the message. And, a lot of people are suffering themselves or want to help those that are suffering. And so we've just found a lot of great supporters along the way and a lot of advocates. Unfortunately, with the research that's coming out, with books like Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, and a lot of these other initiatives that are happening in California, Oregon, a lot of people are starting to realize that maybe this is the way that we should look into for bettering mental health. And it's just keep supporting that. And as that happens, more people, come to us, and, we do our best to keep up with it. And, really, unfortunately, for the sake that veterans are suffering, but fortunately that we are here, the demand from veterans has been through the roof, and every year it just exponentially grows.
And on your website, it says leading the way for ayahuasca and psychedelic therapies for veterans. Is that what you see as your mission, as getting more people to follow and more people to take what you're doing and be able to reach more veterans?
So the Ranger motto is "Rangers lead the way," and that stems from a story in World War II where Rangers took the lead, Pointe du Hoc, climbing the cliffs during the invasion of Normandy. And so that's sort of the ethos we try to bring to this. And like I said, there's a lot, and we're not the only ones. There's a lot of great organizations and institutions and some people have risked their own careers just to push this forward out of the belief that it is effective and that it can help people. And so we're just trying to do our part within the veteran community and build these infrastructures, lead the conversation, go boldly forth so that others can follow us and hopefully, overcome suicidal ideation, overcome depression and PTSD that are destroying their lives. And so we're just trying to, if we need to be a lightning rod, we'll be the lightning rod. But no matter what, we know what our mission is. We're being effective of it. And so we just have to continue to move forward.
Well, sounds like you're doing pretty amazing stuff already. If people want to learn more or contribute or just get more information, the website is heroicheartsproject.org. We end with 3 quick questions. The first one being, what's the best advice you were ever given?
The best advice is that it takes about 2 years for you to become, at least 2 years for you to become sort of the subject matter expert of anything. A lot of us want to dive in and be impatient, and I was the exact same way. But it really is, after you reach doing something for 2-3 years, then that's when you kind of have authority, and that's when traction really starts happening for you.
Yeah, I've heard that put as we tend to overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but underestimate what we can do in 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of same thing put differently. Your favorite book of all time?
The favorite book of all time. That's, I guess, I'd have to say The Sun Also Rises or The Great Gatsby. I really like, the authors that come from that era, the Hemingway or Fitzgerald.
Very nice. Last one. What is a habit or ritual that you wouldn't give up doing that you could recommend to other people?
Habit or ritual? I always try to drink a lot of water during the day. That just generally helps with, health. And I think that's one of those things I recommend, that people are generally dehydrated, but also just really try to find the times to find even 5 minutes of peace. It doesn't have to, meditation can help, but even if you're just by yourself, calm, not thinking about anything, not thinking about work, it really does help with your stress level, with your clarity, all that kind of stuff. So even if you're at your peak, you can always find 5 minutes of just finding that little bit of seclusion for yourself.
I love that. The website again is heroicheartsproject.org. Jesse Gould, thanks for taking the time, my friend.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.